Welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast, your go-to hub for all things writing, world building, and the occasional dive into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We're breaking down the barriers between you and your next great story. Whether you're a seasoned scribe or just scribbling your first sentences, we've got something for you. We'll be discussing everything from crafting compelling characters to dissecting the good, the bad, and the downright bizarre in the world of fiction. Okay, this script says you guys are eccentric. Isn't that just a 3-syllable word for weird? No offense. So, whether you're in need of inspiration, a good laugh, or just a couple of weirdos to keep you company on your writing journey, you're in the right place. Thanks for tuning in to the Wordy Pair Podcast.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Wordy Pair Podcast. As always, I'm Rudy.
And is Justin.
Is Justin what?
Is Justin here to talk about some Nichijou?
That is correct.
That was a question. What the heck? I mean, that is correct.
Well, so one of the great things... So we're not just here to talk about Nichijou in general. We're going to talk about the first episode in particular. This might become some kind of a occasional series where we pick up an episode and dig into it a little bit. But Nichijou is a very, very funny, kind of absurdist comedy in a lot of ways, where it kind of mixes everyday stuff with very bizarre things with fantastic results. And there will be plenty of that just in the first episode to talk about. So I was kind of aiming for that kind of absurdity.
Yes, it's a multi-layered guffaw incongruent.
Basically.
That is the scientific term, I believe. And everything
MGI,
about it.
Or no, MGC? Or
no,
was it
Metal Gear has
congruence or
nothing to do with
incongruence?
this. Incongruence.
MSG.
MSG, there we go. It's actually not MSG.
It's not MSG.
Metal Sear Galad.
Metal Slug Gala.
Metal Slug Gelato.
Sure.
We're not as funny as Nichijou. Let's talk about Nichijou.
Yeah, let's talk about Nichijou.
What a banger of a show. This is a show that came out, over a decade ago now, right?
Oh, yeah, way more. I mean, it's probably been almost 20 years at this point.
Wow. That means that Azumanga's been like almost 30.
Yes. Azumanga Daioh was in the early 90s, I believe.
Was it? Was it early 90s?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure. I guess I could be wrong, but, we're old people. We're very old. And the things that we like are also old, because we're old.
But I mean, Azumanga Daioh is still recognized to this day. I think Nichijou is recognized somewhat, but I don't think it ever reached the heights of Azumanga recognition.
Well, it's harder to
pin down.
It's harder to pin down, and it's harder to find just like that little tiny clip that is hilarious on its own. Azumanga Daioh had a lot of very good lines that you could quote and things that you could refer to that took, less than a sentence, but there's a lot of build-up leading to payoff in Nichijou, and it takes a little time to do that.
It's also more of a gag comedy than a line.
It was originally a 4-koma, right? It was I think I have the first book of the manga where it's basically just 4-panel comics, but they kind of have a through line through them, so there was a little bit of at least kind of continuity, if not necessarily a story.
Yeah, so we have
in the first episode alone, we get introduced to
like 7 characters.
Say 6 or 7 characters. We have the main 3. We have Aoi, Yuko, and Mai, right?
I thought it was Mio.
Is it Mio?
Yeah, Mio, Mai, and Yuko.
Okay, I must be... Okay, I thought it was Aoi, but...
One of us is drunk. We'll figure that out later.
One of us is very drunk. Blue hair, brown hair, troll. We get introduced to them.
So we came to the conclusion we have Yuko, who is essentially the fool in this comedy act.
Usually, yes.
Yeah, we have Mio, who is the straight man. And then we have Mai, who is like some sort of weird, sinister, eldritch chaos god incarnate.
Basically, yeah.
Basically trolls Yuko all the time.
Trolls everybody.
Trolls everyone, but mostly Yuko.
Yes.
And I mean, it's not part of this episode, but there is a particular troll in this show that is one of my favorite gags of all time.
Yeah.
And we'll get there one day, but we'll save that. But this particular one, we have, how did the intro go for the first episode again? That was, that wasn't Yuko and Mio.
The intro
that
was motivation. It was Mio and Yuko.
Right. It's just them.
It's Yuko
school
saying she couldn't get motivated, and Mio was like, "I'm going to assume you're right with Mio, but won't it be hilarious when we discover that I was the one who was right and you were the one who was wrong?" But
listen, you prattle on. I'm looking it up right now.
Okay, look it up. So basically, Yuko is saying, "I can't get motivated," and Mio's like, "Well, how does it even go? It's hard to even."
She said she couldn't get motivated, and Mio says that, "Oh well, no, it's the first day of school and everything. You've got to kind of like look around and you'll find your motivation." And then Yuko tells her that she
can't even find the motivation to find motivation.
Yeah. Okay. I think your mistake was Yuko's first name is Aoi.
That's it.
Yeah, it's Yuko, Mio, and Mai.
Okay. So anyway,
which apparently they have a name that doesn't show up in the show. The Tsuchiraka 3.
Okay. So anyway, she can't find motivation to even find motivation, and so then Mio is basically like, well, then just get motivated, and that fools Yuko into feeling motivated, which then leads into a short Japanese poem. Wouldn't it be nice to be an idiot?
And that is Japanese comedy and poetry summed up in a nutshell in the very first opening sketch.
Pretty much.
So then we're moving on.
Yes.
Then we have the wonderful intro song. The fantastic intro song.
Extremely
energetic. One of the greatest intro
very
songs
fun.
of all time.
Lots of very
much
rapid
energetic.
movement in the animation. Lots of fun.
Very, very good animation, too, considering... This was the strange thing about this show at the time. When this show came out, it was so gorgeously animated, considering that comedy anime tends to be much lower budget. I mean, the budget for this show must have been enormous, given how well it was animated. And it wasn't just that it was well animated on the regular, like for most of what you were watching. There were also these scenes that were so over the top and overly animated that it's quite possible that I remember I remember seeing a video pop up on YouTube every once in a while that was called How to Destroy Your Budget by Over Animating. And it expressly was talking about Nichijou. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if Nichijou underwent some kind of fiscal collapse due to the animation budget, but I could believe it. There were,
it's believable.
Even in the opening scenes, when I guess we can talk about the gag first. So you have these two other characters, kind of more side-ish characters in the anime that are the professor Hakase, and she's this little girl in a lab coat. She's like, I don't know, Baby Okabe or something.
Yeah.
And she has built this robot teenage girl that looks older than her.
Right.
And they live together, and it's just the two of them. So this child-looking professor builds a robot, and then the robot is basically like taking care of the child, but at the same time, the child is responsible for all of the inner workings of the robot. So this robot girl, you don't get too much of a hint of her motivations in the first episode, but she kind of drops a hint here or there that she'd like to be normal.
She wants to be a real boy.
Yeah, she wants to be a real boy. but it's more than that as the show goes on. She wants to be perceived as normal, and it's one of those mini stories that fleshes itself out a little bit as you go on, but because it's a comedy show, there's not really any resolution to it. It's just more sort of, okay, well, she's in...
It's not that there's no resolution to it. It's that the resolution isn't completed, but we do get a lot of little things where, the lesson that we get in the end is that nobody really cares that she's a robot. And so she needs to, it's up to her to get over the issue that she has with herself, as opposed to everybody else where they don't care at all.
And she needs to buck up.
Yeah, exactly.
But the insanity of her existence, it becomes more and more apparent as the show goes on. The first sketch, she's in a debate with the professor who wants something else for breakfast, but she has cooked this other thing for breakfast, and they're arguing about it.
We can be
and
clear.
Then the cat steals the food.
The professor wants rice omelet, classic Japanese food, eggs, rice, ketchup, etc. And she's
mayonnaise,
cooking.
probably.
She's cooking a grilled fish, and she's not just cooking a grilled fish. She's cooking a grilled fish on one of those tiny bucket-shaped Japanese grills that is like only exists in Japan and was out technology 400 years ago, but somehow still exists today. So she's grilling up a fish on that for Hakase, and so they get into the argument about their food, and it takes as they're arguing, suddenly Hakase gets this look on her face, which causes Nano to look back around and discover that a cat has grabbed. And this is a hard thing for a cat to do if you really think about it deeply, because this is a bucket-shaped grill that the whole thing is hot. You can't touch it, so you have to use chopsticks to manipulate anything that you want to put on top of it. The cat managed to go in, grab the thing without burning itself or making a noise, and is already halfway out the yard.
So she
goes to chase it.
What was the guy's name in who was in the Austin Powers movies? She like Seth Green runs after it.
Yeah.
And that is an old reference actually.
It is.
No one's going to understand what's going on here. But yeah, she runs after this cat trying to get this food. Has a brief moment of imagining that the cat is bringing the food to its own family, and that puts a smile on her face. But it distracts her just enough to where she doesn't realize she's about to run into someone.
And it's very much a running into someone at a corner anime-style situation kind of thing, only she is distracted by the idea of a cat having a family and not toast in her mouth.
Yeah, so that's a little bit more comedy-centric, I guess. I mean, it's what happens is a slow and everything, even the drama in this show is meant to be taken as comedy. This isn't a show that has any real moments where it's a downer. You're supposed to be happy watching the show.
Part of the issue with the show is that the comedy, the way that most of the comedy works in Nichijou is that you mix the absurd or bizarre with the mundane, right? That's kind of the joke of calling the show Nichijou, which kind of means like everyday life. And if you just thought of if you looked at the way the show is animated and you didn't know anything about it, and you never seen any of the comics, you don't know who Arawachi or Arawi Keiichi is. If you don't know anything about it and you see a show called Nichijou that looks like this, you think it's going to be some really dull slice of life crap, right? That's the aesthetic of the show. All those shows that are humorously referred to as the genre cute girls doing cute things. That is what this show looks like and sounds like if you don't know anything about it. And then what Keiichi does is he throws in all of this bizarre, absurd humor and crazy nonsense and, sarcasm, sight gags, even some violence gags that turns the show into something that is actually incredibly fun to watch.
Yeah, and even in this episode, one of the more absurd things that happens is they're at a school assembly, and the teacher kind of calls out someone who was riding a goat into school as his transportation,
which we saw earlier. Like, I mean, there's a lot of setup and payoff that's not really brought out, right? Like,
because they show him riding the goat into the school earlier in the episode.
We see him riding the goat into school, and no one says anything about it. No one looks at him. He doesn't have a line. Nothing happens. It's just like a few frames of animation as they're all going into class, and then 6-7 minutes later in the show, suddenly the goat gets brought up. There's a lot of that in this show where oh yeah, we're gonna show this thing, and then right when you've forgotten about it, we're gonna bring it back up again. We're gonna do it in the most absurd and hilarious way possible.
Yeah, and the absurdity is it kind of ratchets throughout this show. So you're in this assembly. This teacher calls you up for riding a goat. Now the person that was riding the goat immediately strikes back. And, he says, what's wrong with riding a goat? It's not in the school policy that you can't ride a goat. And the teacher, her character is essentially thus, that she made the attempt at putting her foot down, and got the slightest pushback and immediately folded and said, I guess goats are okay.
Yeah.
But this is not even the beginning of the ratcheting, because at this point we are presented with the image of a gun held to the student's head who rode the goat, and the gun fires. It is a real gun.
It
and
certainly
you see
is animated
a streak
as
of
if
blood.
it's a real gun, yes.
Yeah, it is. You see a streak of blood, and he collapses, and there's this girl standing over him that starts shouting at him. I believe the way the subtitle translated it was denied, but
yes.
Basically, she's angry that she is angry that he is so absurd for riding a goat into school. And yet the real absurdity here is that they're in the middle of a school. Here's a student with a gun. She just shot someone, and he gets back up, and they get into an argument, and this is perfectly normal.
He pulls out a handkerchief, and he doesn't use it to wipe his forehead. He uses it to clean his glasses. It's layer upon layer upon layer of little tiny philodos of absurdity that just keep piling up until you get the delicious baklava, which is our Nichijou.
And it never stops getting better as it goes on. That's the strangest thing. I mean, it has its ups and downs, but it just keeps getting more and more absurd as it goes on, to the point at which the robot is in school and they're trying to get her to drink oil and eat bolts because they all know she's a robot, but she doesn't know that they know she's a robot. She thinks she's being tested, at which point you should assume that they know you're a robot.
Yeah. But I mean, let's not get too ahead of ourselves.
Right. Jumping back to the first episode.
We were at Nano running into a person around a quarter. Now, normally this would just be like, oops, I bumped into you, and we fall down and we have a good laugh, and then there's some kind of vaguely rom-com joke that shows up after that. That is not at all what happens when she bumps into this poor guy, who we don't even get a name of him this episode, if ever. We might not ever get his name, but he doesn't appear.
I really don't recall. He only
I can't remember. But she runs into him, and what actually happens, she's not even going that fast. She's just kind of going at because she's wearing one of those really long skirts that goes all the way to her ankles, so she can't really run that fast, right?
And she was running like Seth Green in Austin Powers.
And he's not running at all. He's just walking. This is totally oops, excuse me, kind of speeds we're talking about. And what actually happens is that the bump generates a gigantic explosion that appears to extend for many, many city blocks. It is all absurdly detailed animation of this explosion happening, and you think it's kind of just a sight gag. You're like, oh, this is just a sight gag, ha ha ha. But in fact, you then discover, here's the next layer, that we get some footage of things getting blown away by the explosion afterwards. And so it must have some reality to it, you think. I mean, but, it doesn't actually destroy the city, so it must be, just kind of a joke that, oh, we saw a car get pushed back a few inches and a couple of items get blown out randomly. That's just, part of the joke. So we cut. We cut over to Yuko and Mio are walking to school, and they're having a very mundane conversation. Mio forgot to put her badge on her identification badge on her uniform, and she's worried she's going to get called out. And Yuko's like, oh, it's not a big deal. And then she says, if someone calls you out, just tell them you're an older student. It's like, that doesn't even solve the problem at all.
They have these inane conversations that are also
pretty
much joke conversations throughout the show.
And then I don't remember if something precipitates it, but suddenly they hear like a sound, which is the explosion, and Mio's like, oh, is that thunder? It's so bright and sunny, though. It's just weird, And a moment later, a wooden doll, a kokeshi doll, falls and hits Yuko on the head, square on the head. And it's going fast. It hits her, and she almost falls down. She crouches down on the ground. She's like, ow, this hurt. The thing clatters to the ground. She's like, why is it raining, kokeshi dolls? That really hurt. And then
she takes a positive outlook to it immediately. She takes a positive look at it. And they start walking again. And Yuko's like, well, maybe I'm just very lucky that, I'm the one... That kind of thing doesn't happen very often. Maybe it's kind of like a sign that it's my lucky day, that this bad thing happened early on, and maybe the rest of the day is going to be great. And Mio's like, well, maybe. And then wham!
a
red wooden cow.
A red wooden cow sculpture. These are very. This is a very Japanese culture thing. They make these little red, like wooden cows that have a head that is like on a spring on the inside, so you can't see the spring, but the head bobs up and down, and you can like stand it up, and it just kind of sits there and nods at you. And one of these, and by the way, I've seen these things before. They're pretty big and they're pretty heavy for their size. It hits her in the head, and she falls down again, and she's like, "Oh man, that really hurt. Maybe I'm not so lucky after all." And then they start walking again. And Yuko is always constantly optimistic. She says, "You know what? Maybe I was wrong about this not being lucky. 2 of these things early in the day, it could be way worse. It could be that some kind of like raw food landed on my head, and that's just completely out of the question." At which point
we have a giant slab of salmon smacking her clear in the head and just sticking there.
Right.
And she freezes, and Mio freezes, and
Everybody
Yuko goes
freezes.
pale. Mio drops the kokeshi and the akabeko and just stands there staring. And Yuko slowly reaches up and grabs the salmon and pulls it down and says, "Oh my god, it's a salmon."
Basically.
Essentially. Much more funny than I did it. But
yes.
And with much less weird accent.
Yes. Well, they're speaking Japanese.
That was all to stifle a sneeze, by the way.
Oh, is that how that works?
Yes, that's why I did that. But yeah, she pulls down a chunk of salmon and she screams, "It's salmon!" And then it cuts to a scene of a van driving down the road, which, if you were to try and westernize this show, they would leave that scene out.
Yes.
And they would leave that scene out because they don't know what a palate cleanser is.
Right.
That happening is just a quick aside to transition to a new scene.
Is that they're a staple throughout the whole series. Every episode is going to have a palate cleanser between a couple of the segments that is just going to be basically a still camera shot of part of the city. And what will typically happen is that the first shot will be just perfect normalcy. The second one will have something that refers to something that happened earlier in the episode but isn't particularly funny. And then the third shot will have something in it that refers to something that happened in the episode and is funny. So in this case, we get one shot with just like, it's just an intersection and a corner shop and nothing special. The second one, I think the second one is still just pretty much normal in this one. They escalate it later. But the third one, we get to see Nano running around after having been exploded.
Yeah, and we also get the one where they're walking home from school. It's Sasahara and the goat. The kid that rode the goat, by the way, also has his own butler because he portrays himself as being from a well-to-do family when in reality their family are farmers, and that's why he rides a goat to school.
Right. He's very he's got the cravat and everything. It's quite funny.
Yeah. He's the eldest son of the Sasahara family.
He's the eldest son of the Sasahara family. Now, it's funny because this explosion happened, and you would think that if this explosion happened, certainly there must be a center to this explosion. But as we discover throughout the episode, up to and including all the way at the very, very end of the episode before the ending credits, the explosion happened, but nothing actually exploded. Everything that was in the explosion got pushed away from the shockwave at full speed without any real significant damage. Nano's a little bit worse for wear, but not, she didn't blow up. The poor kid with the headphones that was walking down the street didn't blow up. He's okay. He's a little lost, but he's okay. But like we had this giant city-sized explosion that happened from someone running at 4 miles an hour into someone walking at 2. And not only that makes all of the early jokes kind of happen as well, because the items that we saw flying away from the explosion were the kokeshi doll, the akabeko, and the salmon fillet.
Yeah, and it's another important thing to point out was that, this is just supposed to be a gag comedy show.
Yes. For
your viewing entertainment. They animated that explosion on the level of like a Gunbuster 2.
Yeah.
Or some crazy action anime. And they do this throughout the show several times, but this is like the first big one. I was gonna say if you go on YouTube, you can look up
Labor movies, and the action animation in those movies was really good. And this is kind of that kind of quality. It's bizarre.
Yeah, it was a very weird direction to take it, but also a very awesome one.
Yes.
I mean, it's probably the most detailed comedy anime there is.
Yeah. Well, when it needs to be. Most of the time, it's actually pretty simplistic, but, like...
It's still well animated when it's simplistic, though. That's the thing.
Yeah, there's a lot of frames and stuff like that, but what I mean is that the character designs are pretty simple and stuff like that.
Like, I'm trying to think of some other ones that might be on that level. You know, you had, like, Full Metal Panic Fumofu is pretty well animated.
Well, but Full Metal Panic Fumofu was a spin-off of a non-comedy action anime that had good animation, so they just kind of leveraged that same thing. This is one of those very few cases where you get really good animation throughout for something that is pure comedy. And if you look at a lot of comedy anime, you see that they often cut a lot of corners with their animation just because it's way easier to draw face faults that way.
Well, I think it's a thing they kept talking about in, I believe it was Bakuman, where it's an anime about making comics and anime, and they talked about how the comedy stuff usually had, lower quality animation and drawing in it.
Right.
There was that one guy they kept referencing, the comic artist that the one guy really liked and based everything off of, and it was just like a superhero, cheapo superhero comic.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's rare to see this much effort put into the animation quality of a comedy anime.
Yeah, exactly.
And Azumanga Daioh, by comparison, was incredibly simplistic.
Right.
So the joke with the explosion, if we wrap that one up in its entirety, we already talked about the things falling from the sky. That was a bit of the fallout, literally, from that particular gag. But we also had Nano, the robot, on the roof of a house. She kind of just wakes up there and can't figure out.
There's an extended scene where she gets up. It's very funny to me because there's an extended scene where she kind of like regains consciousness, discovers she's on top of a roof, and there's like a 15-20 second still shot of her walking around the roof looking to see if there's like a ladder or a staircase. There's no lines. It's not even like a close-in shot. It's just a far distant, like overhead shot of this tiny Japanese woman robot walking around the top of a roof for like 10 or 15 seconds until finally she's like, there's no way down.
Yeah. And I have the comic that one is in. Yeah. And they pretty much did it exactly like it happens in the comic, with the exception of in the comic, it just shows her at each of the four corners of this house looking for a way down. But
considering that it's a 4-coma comic for the most part, four panels is a whole comic. So if we show her at four corners of a house, that's the whole comic. I have the little bit of the comic that I've read. This is an example of really good adaptation as well. Like, they don't take a lot of liberties with the comic. They do the things that the comic is doing pretty faithfully, which I think is another one of its strengths, because Arawi Keiichi is a really funny person.
Yeah, and she's up on the roof. She realizes that she's stuck up there, and that's when she kind of starts realizing that, one of her shoes is missing, her chopsticks are gone. Then she realizes she's missing one of her hands, and she's like, oh, great, now everyone's going to know I'm a robot. And she kind of sinks to her knees and just kind of holds her head in misery. But as she says, everyone will know I'm a robot, the whole time, this character has a metal winding key in her back.
Key. Yeah, exactly.
And
it turns with a crunch.
Yeah, it turns with a slight crunch as she's sort of moping about this.
Moping that because her hand is missing, with her really long sleeves that could hide it anyway, that everyone will know she's a robot.
Yeah, it wouldn't be the key on her back that would let them notice. It would be the hand missing. And yeah. So that's kind of her character. She's a little self-conscious, but also a little bit...
But also like self-conscious, but with holes.
Yeah.
Because later in the episode, she spends some time talking to Hakase about getting rid of the key, and she's like... And the things that she brings up as to why she wants to get rid of the key are not because she wants to look normal. It is because she wants to sit normally in a chair and be able to roll over when she's sleeping.
Yes, and she also gets a good glimpse. Apparently she didn't know why her own key was there, so she asks the professor, and the professor goes, oh, I never showed you, and she cranks up the key, and all it does is cause her foot to steam up and fire her big toe off into the sunset.
To embed into the wall.
Yeah, it embeds itself into the wall.
Which is also a setup, believe it or not.
Yes, it is a setup. But yeah, she specifically says, "Is that all that key does?" And the professor says, "Yes."
Well, the professor says that's all it does, but the reason it's there is because it's cute.
Yeah, that's the
professor's
real reason.
Entire rationalization for it.
The professor is very fickle and childish because she is an 8-year-old child.
Like an 8-year-old child, yeah.
And not like in an anime way where it's just like, oh, it looks like an 8-year-old, but she's really 375. No, she's actually supposed to be 8 years old, but somehow also this genius that built a
humanoid robot, but didn't do anything else as far as... No, she builds a couple other things.
Yeah, she has a bunch of wacky inventions, but that's about it. Yeah, so the joke with the explosion finally ends at the very end of the episode.
Yeah.
The guy that she ran into that was walking around listening to headphones is just standing on a rooftop, similar to how Nama was,
he's not
staring
just
off
on a
into
rooftop.
the evening sun.
He's sitting on the top of a water cooler. Or not water cooler,
was it a water
tower.
Cooler?
I think it was a water tower. He's like all the way at the top of a water tower, and he's sitting there, knees up, pressed up against his chest, and he's like, I don't even know where I'm at. No one noticed he was gone for the whole day.
Yeah. And then he presses play on his iPod. He has the original iPod. He presses play on the iPod, and it goes into the ending theme for the show. So that was a nice touch.
Exactly. By the way, opening and ending themes for this show are all excellent.
Yeah, the music for this show is top notch. The soundtrack for the show, the background music, all of it is very nice and like almost Looney Tunes-esque orchestrated, but softer instead of sillier to give it a more like kind of like a slice of life charm to it, but with a
Well, it's almost like the background music that you would hear for the intro for like a cooking show or something. It's very incidental, and it's just like, a little flute going da 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 da, and that's basically it. But it's really,
like
really
the soundtrack for a children's educational show where everything is going to be nice and happy, and you're going to learn something
that's
from
a good comparison.
The talking dog or whatever. So it's a very, very whimsical and lighthearted and very fun, and the comedy in it is like laugh out loud comedy in a lot of places.
In a lot of places, yeah.
Yeah, almost every episode has a couple of big laugh out loud moments. And
even after you've seen it a couple of times too, like I watched it yesterday because I thought maybe we were going to record yesterday, and I wanted to be extra prepared. So I watched it yesterday, and I was just sitting there, and I'm like, oh man, this is funny, and I'm laughing out loud at this thing because I hadn't seen it in years. I have it in one of those packs where it's still hybrid DVD Blu-ray. So that's how old the show is.
Yeah. So I know the one that got me today was like I had a good chuckle at I had forgotten what was going on in the part of the show where Mai, the Chaos God incarnate, also high school girl, she's playing frisbee with her dog, and she tosses
you think that she is.
Well, yeah, you think she's playing frisbee with her dog. She tosses what appears to be a frisbee, and the dog goes chasing after it, leaps into the air, goes to bite it, and there's a gunshot, and the frisbee explodes because it's actually a clay pigeon. And we cut back to Mai, and she's holding a double barrel rifle, and she's just like looking down the sight at it. And is that right? Double barrel rifle?
It's either a rifle or a shotgun.
I feel like it would be funnier if it was a shotgun, but it doesn't seem like clay pigeon shotgun plus dog is the... I mean, it is Mai, so maybe...
I mean, like, usually you shoot clay pigeons with a shotgun because it's really hard to hit them with a rifle. Like, that's the much more common application of clay pigeons, because it's going to be 100 yards away and it's moving pretty quick. And so the extra space that you hit with a shotgun is usually helpful for it. Now, the fact that she didn't hit her dog at all is indicative that either she's really good with that shotgun or it was a rifle. Because they do make side-by-side rifles.
Yeah, and either way, it's hilarious because first off, they're in Japan. Second off, what is she doing with a gun? Even if it wasn't Japan, she's a high school girl. It wasn't in frame earlier. Like it's not like she had it wasn't. She looks like she's in a park or something too.
Yeah.
The dog is oh so happy to go running after this thing, and it's literally like right next to it when it explodes. So the bullet was like, I mean, that dog was closer to death than it had ever been. And then when it cuts back to the dog is perfectly okay with this, wagging its tail like, all right, let's play some more. This
is normal. And then Mai gives the peace sign, or I guess it's the victory sign, with the rifle in hand.
Yeah, and it just that joke. You know, it had been so long since I'd seen it, I forgot what happened, and so I laughed out loud at that one.
I lost it yesterday when I saw that. I was like, I completely forgot that was what happened with that.
And Mai really is the one more than anyone in the show that'll get you laughing like that. I mean, so many good moments with her, and she's not in the show as much as the other two characters.
Yeah.
She's quite literally there for the build-up to a really big joke most of the time.
Usually, yeah.
We
move on back into the classroom, right?
Yeah.
And I'm trying to remember the order of operations here. At some point, the teacher walks in and she has a wooden Buddha statue. And she sets the statue on her little lectern and she says, I found this in my shoe locker this morning when I came in. Who put this in my shoe locker? And everyone's like, is it some kind of student that has like some kind of weird crush on the teacher? But even so, it would be very strange for a student to find, buy, and or make a wooden Buddha statue and put that into someone's shoe locker. This is, a very strange thing for someone to do. So, she's like, who did this? I promise I won't be mad, but I just want to know who did this. And she gets no answer for now.
Yeah, and that's one of the moments where you get the you get a bit of messing about with the comedic timing. So they make you forget about that by giving you a sketch right after that of Mio and Yuko. They're eating lunch. Mai gets up, walks away. It's almost the end of lunch. And Yuko has saved this piece of sausage for last. They translated it as sausage.
It's one of those little adorable octopus sausage things that you see in Japanese anime all the time, right? You cut across in the bottom of like the top of a hot dog, and you fry it up a little bit so that it bends out, and you get something that looks like a little octopus. It's one of those.
Yeah, yeah, and they clearly said wieners in Japanese.
That's what you call it in Japanese. That's just the name for it.
Yeah, and they do translate it as sausage, but I mean, for my money, the line would have been so much better if she had said, "Don't you like eating wieners?" We're going the Oscar Mayer route. So
yeah,
that's just a failing on the part of whoever translated it, though. They should have gone for the full humor of it.
The thing is that the one of the things that this series doesn't really do is go into like lewd jokes. Like it could, but it doesn't.
Not often, but it does have that whole thing about Mio drawing lewd comics. You don't see anything. It's just a gag that she has.
There's a little gag there, and the gag is more about her trying to get them back rather than the contents, right? But like in general, like the joke is not that we said a naughty word, right?
Yeah. No,
or we said something that's double entendre.
That joke is not actually part of it.
Right.
I'm just thinking of, there's a fan sub of that show.
Yeah.
And I don't know just how well known that screenshot is, but that does exist where the subtitles are below Mio-chan saying, "Don't you like eating wieners?"
Sure.
So,
but
anyway,
that's done because the person making that fan sub is trying to be cheeky and
or is
funny
Chinese
on their own. Or either or.
But anyway, getting away from my personal like headcanon for the show. Piccadilly Lane. After that happens, Yuko is like, well, no, you save the best thing that you want to eat for last, and that way you can finish by saying umai or whatever it was she said. Delicious, And she's holding it in her chopsticks, and it slips. And This is one of those moments where you get the intense animation that this anime is so well known for.
Exactly.
Dramatic music starts playing. Everything starts going in slow motion. You get these action lines around the sausage as it starts to fall to the ground. Yuko reaches for it for her chopsticks. Impressively grabs it again on the first try, but it slips out once more. And so she goes for a grab with her other hand, pressing one hand against the...
It's worth noting that when it slips out, it kind of does this little curly Q movement that it couldn't do physically, but it makes it more funny looking.
Right. And that's...
So she goes in for another grab.
Yeah, she goes for another grab, and you have another constant of it slipping away from her grasp with another curly cue, and it starts to shoot off like.
You're skipping bits because after the first slip, right? Well, so she drops it the first time, she grabs it momentarily with the chopsticks the second time, and then she does a full-on Dragon Ball Z Super Saiyan. This predates the Blue Super Saiyan thing, but she does Blue Super Saiyan and goes for a second attempt to recatch with the chopsticks in her right hand and her left hand trying to guide it into the chopsticks. And what she manages to do is push it just beyond her chopsticks, but she gives it a large horizontal velocity that now projects it away from her entirely and off toward the side of the classroom, where...
Well, she projects it off to the side of the classroom because she's a Super Saiyan god in that moment. That's where this incredible velocity apparently comes from.
Right.
And as it's traveling through the vastness of space between her desk and Mai's sitting at her desk holding up a baseball glove ready to catch it with a blank expression on her face, which is Mai's thing.
Yes.
And another character, slow motion, walks into the shot.
It could be left there. Right, it could be left at the sausage is flying towards Maya and she catches it with the catcher's mitt. But that's not
it could
where,
be if you're not Arawi.
But it cuts to a picture of the floor between their desks where there is a 1 yen coin on the floor.
Yes, and this as another character enters the scene, coming in from the hallway into the classroom, and he's this kid that has like this blonde mohawk.
Yes,
he sees the coin on the floor and reaches down to grab it. And so we see the sausage flies through his mohawk. As it's pushing through the mohawk, it kind of has a pause, and then Yuko has this look of horror on her face, but then it goes through the mohawk, and Mio goes, "It's broken through." And the sausage continues to fly to the glove. Mai catches it, and she does a dramatic catch, swinging her arm to the side, but the sausage slips out through the side of the glove. And now it's
flying toward the back of the classroom, where it basically flies and it's going to hit these lockers and then hit the floor. So Yuko begins to chase after it now. She gets out of her desk and she runs, soccer
very
or baseball anime style.
Yeah. It's not over, that kind of thing.
Yeah. And the sausage hits the thing, and as it hits, you hear Yuko's voice count 1, and it's falling. You hear Yuko's voice count 2. It hits the ground. You hear Yuko's voice count 3, and then Yuko is there to grab it with her chopsticks and fling it up into the air, holding onto it by the barest possibility. And she says, "It's safe."
And Mio, with a horrified expression on her face, goes, she essentially says, "No matter how you look at it, it's out." But really, the Japanese just says "out da yo."
Right.
It's just like the culmination of Mio being the straight man. It's like after everything that happened, everything that did go down was pretty impressive overall from an act of God standpoint.
Impressive, but not sanitary.
Yeah. So even then, Mio was like, "No, that's out. You didn't. No,
don't eat that. Please don't eat that."
And she eats it.
And then she eats it.
And says "umai,"
and says, "Don't you know about the 3-second rule?"
Yeah, she brings up the 3-second rule. Legitimate translation. Yes. She did say it was the Sambyo rule.
And so we have this great scene that is depicting the most basic possible thing happening. A person drops a piece of food, says, "It's probably fine," and picks it up. And by embellishing every single moment of that thing, we get something that is a laugh-out-loud funny scene.
Yeah. And it's further laugh out loud funny because you're watching it thinking, why did they animate this so well?
Yes.
Which, of course, brings us to the student assembly where the teacher gets in front of the classroom and tells them to avoid getting colds or he'll go teach at another school.
It's not the teacher, it's the principal.
Yeah, the principal. Tells a bunch of bad jokes, and this becomes another sketch, essentially, where Yuko's like, she's like touching Mio on the shoulder like, "Hey, do you think the principal knows that he's not
jokes
funny?"
Are terrible. Yeah.
And it's just a really short thing where she kind of like sits back and questions like, oh, wait a minute, maybe the principal does know he's not funny, but he's teaching us the value of perseverance. And then she gets the shocked expression like, oh my God, what if the principal's a mastermind?
Right.
But she is treated to a strange moment wherein Mai is behind her, and Mai puts her hand on Yuko's shoulder, and Yuko turns around to see Mai chuckling. So Yuko,
not just chuckling, laughing louder than she's ever seen her laugh.
Yeah, there is that.
Which by the way is her kind of chuckling with her hand over her mouth. Like at no point does Mai express any kind of really strong laughter, but
emotion,
this is what
really.
Yuko, pretty much. That's kind of her shtick. But Yuko's like, this is the hardest I've ever seen her laugh. To which Mai then says, oh no, never mind. And Yuko turns back around.
Well, first Yuko makes an attempt to tell her a joke because she's like, maybe I can finally get her to laugh at something. And it doesn't work. Well, she stops halfway through the joke. It's not even that it doesn't work.
She just gives up.
Yeah.
She does like a ninja finger hand signal thing, and she's like ready to tell the joke, and then she's just like, nah. And she turns back around.
Yeah, and then we find out from Mai's perspective that the real reason she was laughing was because there was a piece of octopus tentacle in Yuko's hair. I think it was octopus tentacle.
Well, I mean, the subtitle says squid tentacle, so I don't know.
Oh, yeah, it probably did then.
It just said gesso, which means tentacle, so.
Oh.
But the thing is that we don't just see it from Mai's perspective. We get this dramatic, flourishing, whooshing move of the camera from kind of in front of Yuko to behind Mai so that we can see from Mai's perspective what she's actually seeing.
Yeah, like a full rotation with a matrix camera.
Yeah, exactly. And then Mai's like, well, I won't tell her. I'll wait until she figures out on her own because this is funny.
Yeah.
The principal steps down, and then the teacher steps back up, and she's like, we already talked about her talking about the goat, right? And how people shouldn't.
Yeah, she does that first.
School. She does that first, and then she brings up the Buddha statue again, which you've probably forgotten about at this point. And she's like, who brought this Buddha statue and put it in my shoe locker? We're not ending this assembly until someone owns up to this. I won't be angry. I just would need to know. And everybody looks around. You get the usual kind of like murmur from the students, like, well, maybe you should just raise your stupid hand so we can get out of here, kind of thing.
Yeah. The best part about it is that the students seem to have no problem with like, yeah, we'll tell you, we'll let you know who it is. I mean, it doesn't bother us. Like, who would even be hiding it? Like they're all good students in this moment.
And then what ends up happening is that the principal raises his hand, and he kind of, self-effacingly walks up to the podium and stands up to the microphone and says, yeah, I heard it was Sakurai Sensei's birthday, to which we get like 3 frames of one other teacher suddenly like catching on fire upon hearing this, and then we cut back to the principal, and he's like, I wanted to give her something, nice, so I gave her the Buddha statue, but I guess Buddha statues aren't really a nice present, and are just kind of confusing. And then he goes in to make a traditional 5-line Japanese poem out of the result of that situation. And
then he says the assembly is over.
Yeah.
He was kind of telling it as a joke, but nobody laughed again.
Right. But as he steps down from the podium, the little stage, someone says, because earlier he said, one of his jokes was, if you don't listen to me and you do catch a cold, I'll go become a principal somewhere else. And as he steps off the podium, someone says, like, basically, everybody, let's all remember how great our principal was. And he like turns around and it's the vice principal who is basically kind of implying that because of this series of events, the principal has resigned. And this actually becomes like this is actually a character introduction, because over the course of the whole series, we get a bunch of stuff with the vice principal trying to get rid of the principal in, moderately underhanded but non-violent ways usually.
Yeah.
And you don't realize it's a character introduction at this point because this is just the first episode. But every once in a while,
this show does that a lot. I mean, like the thing with the guy catching on fire in the couple of scenes,
couple of frames.
That is a setup to imply. They don't tell you directly. That's all you get, but they imply that he is in love with Sakurai Sensei. So
right.
So that becomes an unfolding story as it goes on, and that's how a lot of the characters are introduced in this show. Like there's actually a lot more going on with the girl that shot Sasahara. Sasahara and his goat and his family. Mio is actually in love with Sasahara, but they don't mention it too much. But when they bring it up, it's usually to set up a really long sketch.
Yeah, or it's just Yuko making fun of Mio for having that opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're gonna. There's just so many layers and layers and layers upon every gag in this show that it's just amazing to watch, honestly.
Yeah, and the way the characters are introduced so subtly, like almost every character is introduced with incredible subtlety.
Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. The guy with the blonde mohawk.
Yeah.
The sausage going through his hair and popping through was his introduction.
Yeah.
We're going to get a lot more for that character later in the series, but no more in this episode. Well,
anyway,
is there anything that we missed?
I mean, apart from episode 2, no.
I guess so. Well, I mean, this is a series that if you are interested in comedy, especially if you like absurdist comedy, that you will absolutely love this show. It's not fan servicey. It doesn't have any of the usual foibles that make normal people avoid anime in general. It's very while being absurd and hilarious, it's also very forthright at the same time. It's very honest about what it's trying to be, and it doesn't try to pretend to be something else, except when it's doing a setup to a payoff, right? Which is often, right. But you get that that's part of it. This is something that we'll probably pick up every once in a while and do an episode on, because every single episode of this show, I'm pretty sure, is worth talking about to some degree. And believe it or not, we've just spent 53-ish minutes talking about a 23, 24-minute anime episode.
And undoubtedly we could go on.
We could go on, but we'd have to go on to a different episode.
I don't know. I could probably dig around and find more on just this one, but that would be silly at this point.
Yeah, I think we're good. So, yeah, Nichijou, fantastic show. Check it out if you want to see some absurdist comedy. Highly recommended. And I guess that'll do it for today. Yeah?
There's not a lot of good comedy out there these days. People have traded in comedy for depressing climax after climax, cliffhanger after cliffhanger, ultimately to have an anticlimax at the very end and no real payoff. So comedies are few and far between that really, really make you laugh. And this is one of them.
And not just make you laugh with sarcasm or I don't know. There's something very unique about the way that Nichijou mixes absurd and mundane elements to make comedy. And it's just unlike anything that I've ever seen anywhere else. And it's just all done so well and so earnestly that you just can't help but love this show.
Yeah, there's no equivalent to the show that I am aware of.
No, I mean
the closest is Azumanga Daioh. But it's a
Azumanga
totally different
has
type
has a lot of absurd comedy, but it's a lot more mundane, honestly. In general,
it's much more like a slice of life show.
Yes,
than Nichijou is
with comedy elements, whereas Nichijou is a pure comedy where slice of life elements are used as bait for absurdist comedy. And I mean, this or the comics, you can pick whatever you want. You can pick both. They're both worth a look because, if I remember correctly, the first volume of the comics starts with some guy landing at the school in a helicopter because his family runs an apple juice factory or something. I don't know. It's just bizarre. We'll get some of this stuff happens in the show. It's a really good adaptation of the comics, but it's an incomplete adaptation of the comics. So it's just fantastic.
And just as an aside, I guess, there is, I don't know if it's come out as a show yet, but there's another comedy that is being or has been animated.
Yeah.
Based on what is it? City Life, I believe it's called.
Yeah, I think so. It's by the same guy, Arari Keiichi.
I don't know if it was a comic or not, though. It might have been.
I'm pretty sure it was a comic, but they're adapting it or have adapted, or I don't know. I'm way behind on latest animes. I remember seeing a trailer for it probably a year ago, so it might have already come and gone as far as live as far as first run on TV goes. I don't know. So we may have to check that out at some point.
Yeah, and that would be probably the only real equivalent there would be to Nichijou.
Well, I mean, it's not going to be an equivalent, but it's going to have a lot of the same character. And that kind of character, since there's so little of it in this world, the more of it we can get, the better.
Definitely.
All right. I think we've got ourselves an episode.
Yeah, we'll go with that.
Yeah, we'll go with that. we will probably make occasional returns to this because it is, like I said earlier, it's worth talking about. As always, I'm Rudy.
And I'm Justin.
And this is the Wordy Pair Podcast. And we'll have something else writing related for you. Because comedy is writing, and doing good comedy is an effective writing. We'll have something else for you next week. Have a good week, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Wordy Pair Podcast. Our passion is all things writing, world building, and getting into the weird and wonderful world of fiction. We hope you enjoyed our unique takes. If you did, make sure to like, rate, review, and subscribe to get your weekly dose of writing weirdness. We'll be back soon, but in the meantime, hit us up on Twitter. For Rudy, it's @Rudolph_Cone. And for Justin, @Ninja Mouse Chew. See you next time on the Wordy Pair Podcast.